A musician,
a long-distance kayaker,
a businessman,
she looks after animals,
artist,
author.
We interview remarkable people.
They're talented in so many different areas.
You're listening to The Dialogue.
89.7 FM Eastside Radio.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Tricia Velthuizen, CEO of Churchill Education. Now, Tricia, it has taken me all of about 7 months to get you into the studio. I know you have come down from sunny Queensland to be with us and actually have a graduation ceremony that you are going to be attending today.
Yeah, I'm doing a bit of a graduation roadshow as the year ends. So.
Now, Churchill Education, you're the CEO of Churchill Education. Tell me a little bit about Churchill and what it actually does.
Churchill's a registered trainee organisation, and that's the government official term, but for us the heart of it's about helping people translate their life experience, their skills and knowledge, and to turn them into qualifications that take their career onwards or just give them the recognition that they deserve.
You were originally you're a Brisbane girl.
Yes, I am.
You're a born and bred Brizzy girl, come from parents who are, as we I think spoke about, blue collar workers,
Yes.
So great work ethic. Your dad worked very hard as a brickie and a car salesman, and your mom was involved in sort of menial tasks as well. Just worked very hard.
Mum ironed most of my primary school years. Mum ironed clothes for the local doctor or bank manager's family, and then high school she was cleaning cars and packing cakes at a biscuit factory.
So you grew up with parents who worked hard for their money?
Completely worked hard for their money. They've always set a really good example of what a strong work ethic means, and also that never underestimate that someone's job's valuable just because of what they do.
You have two siblings, and all of you somehow landed up in some type of educational job. You speak about your siblings as remarkable, and
they are. Yeah,
they've done incredible things. Are you a close family?
No, I don't think we are particularly. In some ways, I think we'd like to be, but I don't know that we've managed that as well as what we could have. Parents divorced, and this time of year always shows that up a little bit more than other times. But I think my brother and sister and I have got we've got a similar work ethic, we've got a similar belief in the power of education, and I think in the possibility of people.
You were very bright at school. You liked school, clever girl.
I did like school, yeah.
And did well, and you had champions, you said, at school. Champions in junior school, champions
really
in...
Yeah, I was really lucky that I had people that really believed in me and were prepared to help me see that belief, even if I didn't feel it myself.
I laughed at the beginning because when I told you I was interviewing you, I said I was going to interview you about finance.
Yes.
And you looked slightly horrified.
Yes, I was.
Humanities is where your love is, and writing has been really important for you.
Yeah, it has.
If you weren't doing this education path, do you think you would be writing something?
I completely would be writing something. 18 months ago, I thought that I was going to be taking some time out to do exactly that, and life took a different path. But I've worked out that I can be a writer no matter what I do. It's just my audience changes. So right now, I write for Churchill, and I write for the people that I work with and the students that we have the privilege of teaching. And so that's the audience that I write to. We don't need to have a separate world to write to.
Would you like to write a book? What would you like to write?
I'm playing at the moment with some concepts around, I think there's so many leadership books about there, but I think a lot of them lack authenticity. And one of the things that is dearest to my heart is the people that are prepared to share their mistakes and what can we learn from them and how do we be ourselves in these roles. So that's something that I'm playing with a little bit at the moment.
Talking about authenticity and being yourself, you went on from school to university. You went to do law, actually.
Yes.
And the way you explained it to me was that you got asked to leave, and when I asked why, you said you didn't go for 3 years.
No, I didn't turn up. Which is a very awkward moment and a very expensive mistake, because I ran up a very big HECS bill for the privilege of not turning up. I used to occasionally turn up to an exam and I'd write on the paper, I didn't come all year, I'll do better next year. I didn't find find my place very well at university for the first few years, and that was devastating because in my family it was such a proud thing that I was the first. My dad's a migrant, so he's Dutchman. I was the first grandchild child to be at university on both sides of the family, and I felt that I had really let them down. And so there was the fact that I'd let myself down, but I just got lost. I just couldn't find my space there for a while.
You said that even though you'd done so well at school, perhaps your self-esteem wasn't matching your educational ability, you know. So if I were to ask you that question, you deal with so many people coming through your school. Is self-esteem a big problem, more than education as a problem?
I think it is. I think I recognise. I've just said I've been doing the graduation roadshow. So 2 weeks ago I did Brisbane, last week Melbourne, tonight Sydney, next week Adelaide, and I choose to do graduations a little differently than most people do. I don't line them up and take hundreds. I do small groups because I get the story of each student and I stand in front of their families and friends and I share their story. And I do that for every single student that we graduate. And one of the things I've realised is that too often they underestimate themselves, and to hear their story told by somebody else is a thing that gives them pride because they haven't ever seen it that way. So, lack of confidence. So often I ask people, tell me about what you do, what's special, and they say, I don't know, I just do it. And I found myself doing the same thing here today. So I think it is something that we don't appreciate our value.
And we don't share our value. You listen to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Tricia Velthuizen, CEO of Churchill Education. I spoke about the idea of giving and giving back, and you said that you actually spent quite a few years as members of a Assemblies of God church. What was that like? You said it's you likened it a little bit to a Hillsong style church.
Yeah, it was the same. It's a Pentecostal church, and as an adult, I don't think I believe what I was raised in, but there are some principles I've never let go of from it, and one is the principle of you reap what you sow. So what you invest will come back, and a principle too about connecting and giving wherever you can, that we're never to leave someone alone or by the roadside. We pick each other up and carry each other forward. So I think the way I've expressed it as an adult and the way I've expressed it for Churchill is that I now believe we're a river, not a dam.
I read that and I thought it was the most beautiful thing. It just sounded, it says exactly what it is. It flows, it moves, it has a future, whereas a dam is so contained.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought that was very clever. Did you come up with that?
No, actually, someone sat with me one day and looked at me and said, "You're a river, not a dam." And I went, "Oh, that's exactly right." And so that's the way that I've looked at it ever since.
You actually found yourself and decided that you wanted to go back to university, and you did want that law degree, even though you had literally spent 3 years avoiding it.
Yeah.
And you had a bit of a watershed moment where you got a job in a dungeon.
It really was in the dungeon. Like, it was below ground. It had a small window with bars on it. And at street level. So it was up, like, looking at people passing on the street. And my job was to enter data off an invoice into a computer over and over and over again, and I couldn't see natural light really. I was just locked downstairs and I thought, this is not what I want for my life. I don't want to stay in this place. I was bored really quickly, but I got to work with people in an environment I probably wouldn't have worked with as well, so I learned a lot from them, but I took myself to work during the day, and then I'd jump in and cross the river to uni at night and do the full-time study load at night, and life turned around, and I realised that I'm someone that works. I'm dangerous when I'm not busy enough.
Okay.
And so that was kind of that horizon of going, there's something more. I can do something more with this.
Don't you think that's the case for most people? That being idle is really, what is the saying?
Yeah.
Something about the devil's work or something. Idle hands. And the more I also notice that the longer people work and the longer they have a passion into their 80s and 90s, the healthier they seem to be. It's as soon as you hit that retirement phase and you start doing nothing that life really becomes quite meaningless.
Randall and my husband and I have a firm view that we won't retire, and the accountant laughs at us and says one day you'll be tired, but I just take the view that when I retire I'll die, and I just want to keep learning, and there's always something to offer.
How old is the oldest person that's gone through your...
We're 74 at the moment.
Oh, wow. That's phenomenal.
I graduated a lady last week who's 70.
That is incredible.
And she's signed up. She's enrolled in another course of study, another diploma, and she's extending her learning. And I just love the privilege of working with them. It's an extraordinary example for us.
You actually did extremely well as a lawyer. You did. I mean, you didn't just sit in a dungeon somewhere. You became a lawyer, and you went out, and eventually you got involved in being a crime prosecutor, and worked in criminal law.
Yeah, I had a dream to do that since I was 9. So at 9, my teacher said to me, to be a lawyer, you got to be really smart, you got to be working really hard, and I thought, well, I can do that. And at that point, Carson's Law was on TV. Lorraine Bailey was a female barrister in crime, and I thought she was extraordinary. And so I'd always wanted to be a criminal barrister.
And you worked with quite a lot of sort of sexual kind of cases. That tended to be something that you did. And I mean, that's hard. That's hard work. It
really, I became a Crown Prosecutor with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions in Queensland, and over time came to specialise in prosecuting child sex offences. And at that point, it was really hard, and I was, at times, some days I felt quite broken. I have seen and heard things that I hope my children never do. However, the deal that I made with myself was that I was to always see everybody as an individual, and the day that I became numb to their story was the day that I needed to get out. And in the end, I didn't become numb, actually. It just probably hurt too much.
You said that one of the things that you did learn was that every single person that stood in front of you had something about them that was redeeming.
It was extraordinary to me. I learnt the power that everybody has a story. We take for granted our stories, but every single person has a story. And I would be standing in court with people that were accused of things that were horrific. Offending against children in our community is one of the worst things that you can do. And I would see the children and these young people had been offended, but with the exception of a handful of occasions, there was also something to be said for the person that had committed these very acts. And it was such a confusing realisation because I had this realisation that I'm probably not much different. We are all these complex beings that will do things that will cause such hurt, and yet we will also have something extraordinary to give. And so over time, I started to realise that there was possibility in all of us.
Now, you met your husband in jail.
I met my husband at Boggo Road Jail, which, to be fair, I know my mother would have been horrified if it was real. But Randall was a detective sergeant in the Queensland Police Service, and it happened that our office Christmas party was at an old jail, historic jail called Boggo Road, and a colleague of mine and a friend of Randall's decided we should meet.
And that was it?
Look, yeah, he doesn't remember much about it, which played out on our first date when I realised watching him across the street that he was straightening and smiling at every woman that walked towards him. And I realised that he didn't really remember what I look like. But he promised me he was a nice guy and he liked picnics. And it turns out he hates picnics, but he is a nice guy.
Right. They always say things in the beginning, those men, that just are never 100% true. You've had a really challenging but very cohesive marriage and relationship. He was diagnosed 6 years after you met with PTSD. He was.
I came home from work one day to find Randall at home unexpectedly. And when you're married to a police officer, shift work's just a reality for him. But I wasn't expecting him. And he told me he wasn't didn't think he was going back, and he'd been to the doctor. And my husband's the sort of man that never took sick leave. He's always at work, and that in itself was odd that he'd been to the doctor. But he was diagnosed with severe depression, and then agoraphobia, and ultimately post-traumatic stress disorder. And to be honest, I was just relieved when we got the diagnosis, because I'd reached the point of wondering how I'd married someone who just wasn't a particularly nice bloke, and that the promise of I'm a nice guy wasn't real. And so when I realised it was illness, I thought, well, this is something we can do something about. And the focus really became on his health and happiness. I didn't care what he did for a living or how our family worked together apart from that one objective. We had one child at that point, Declan, and that became the focus. So for 18 months, it was all about Randall reaching a point of wellness again.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show, where I interview remarkable people. On the show today, I have Tricia Velthuizen, CEO of Churchill Education. You and Randall launched Churchill together.
We did.
So this is the business that you obviously did together, and he sort of phased out of his police work, which was very hard for him because that's all he wanted to be.
That's all he'd wanted to do. Just as I'd had an idea from a child, Randall had his idea, and without post-traumatic stress disorder, I suspect that both Randall and I would still be doing our jobs, and happily so. We'd have 2 children and still probably living in the same place.
Right.
But the post-traumatic stress, you can't be in the police and have post-traumatic stress. So there was a forced medical retirement. And then, of course, we faced the loss of identity. Who am I and what do I do next? We had Ellie by this stage, 3-month-old. And through the process of Randall having his own skills recognised into qualifications that we thought maybe the non-policing world might understand, because no one understands the policing world as much.
I'm just going to stop you there, because I read I listened to a video, and it was very funny about how you had suggested that he go to a career counsellor.
Yes.
And he'd said no.
Yes.
And then he came home and he said, someone said I should go to a career counsellor.
Don't they always do that? They always. And I just did the good wife thing and smiled and nodded, and in my head thought, oh my goodness. I was just relieved that he was going to do it, and the career counsellor pointed him in the right direction. And I'd come across Randall circling job ads on our bed. Would put the kids to sleep, and I could see he had one of the kids text us, and at that stage, 12 years ago, the jobs were on paper, not online.
Exactly.
And I realised when I looked at them that he was circling armour guard style ads, security guard ads, and I asked him what that was about, because for me that was the last thing he needed to go back and do. But he said to me, all I'm worth is a gun on my hip and a badge on my chest. And I said, you're worth so much more. And so the process of the career counsellor and having his qualifications, police qualifications and police experience mapped to mainstream qualifications, put the spring back in his walk, the confidence in his step, and that sense of, I think I know who I am, started to re-emerge. At that point, someone suggested, why don't you do this for other people? And so Churchill was born, and we set up, an office in the corner of our bedroom on an office works desk with a 3-month-old and a 3-year-old. And from there, we had the privilege for the last 10 years of working with other people that may not have understood what they were worth either.
He actually came out of that experience with 3 qualifications. Not
he
one,
did.
3.
Yeah. And, he rang me, and it was that first kind of hint in his voice of this, we're coming through this into something else. And, business was something we knew nothing about. We opened our business on the 1st of January, which was a national public holiday, and we genuinely waited for the phone to ring. But when you're in police, you don't have public holidays. It didn't occur to us that would be an issue. But we just continued to keep head down and keep asking the question. Randall, being a police officer, will ask anything of anyone and doesn't mind if they say no.
Your business has been successful.
It has.
Both financially and, from the point of view of it's grown fantastically. You put a couple of thousand people through there every single year, which is phenomenal. We were talking earlier about our children and work ethic for children, and how you go from, having a great work ethic when you're young and a family that has nothing. You can learn that work ethic. How do you teach a work ethic to children who are in a privileged environment? And I was very curious about your answer around that.
We've got 4 children now through sheer recklessness. And
twins, I
twins,
think.
yeah, Will and Amelia are 8 years old. And when I said we started the business when Declan was 3 and Ellie was 3 months old, they have seen so much of the work. And when you own a business and you build it up, you've spent so much time behind the scenes, but you reach a point where if it's financially successful, they have so much more than I ever had or Randall ever had. And we've had a lot of ongoing conversations about the reality of that. I've taught my children it is a privilege when someone chooses to work with us, that they take none of that for granted. And our eldest at 14 has just been given he started applying for his first part-time jobs. And for us, we've just had that ongoing conversation about preparing them in advance. So saying to him at 14, this will be what you'll be doing. And at 18, son, when you finish high school, if you want to trip off overseas, that's fine, but mum and dad aren't paying for it. And it's interesting that the more financially stable we've become, the less I have tended to buy them.
Okay.
So I've seemed to have swung
sort
back
of almost
around.
a reaction. It's kind of when I think there is a fear of spoiling your children
Completely.
when you're in that environment, and sometimes it becomes very hard.
Yes.
You are giving people skills to go out into the workforce and change their lives. What does that make you feel?
I continue to feel it's such a privilege. Every time I get to hear a student's story, I am always struck by how extraordinary they are and how they don't realise that. I think I look at what we do as an exponential impact. So I never see the student immediately in front of us. I see the community or the workplace they go back into. And that if we can do good work and recognise with them, they will take that sense and that appreciation for the skills and knowledge they've built up, but they will begin to see it in other people. So for me, the principle of being a river, not a dam, flows through everything we do. So I'm never stopping at just us. And I'm always in awe of what education can do to lift people's lives.
It's an interesting phenomenon, given that education today is quite hard to achieve with HECS and all the rest of it. You know, it's an expensive exercise for a lot of young people to go out there and be educated. And there's a lot of diversity amongst the education process now. I mean, in my day it was just university.
Yes.
You didn't go in, even a diploma wasn't cool, So, but today there is a whole lot of diplomas and a whole lot of how do you know where the authentic and the right place to get education is? What there's such a minefield out there.
There is. I tend to come back to the advice around that the starting point is to always understand that sense of the whisper of dream that you have, and then to look for people that recognise it and are genuine about it. So I'm not a fan of 100% online, because I still believe that the biggest difference is made in education is the people that you connect with in the process, and that someone is your mentor and your teacher. I listen to a TED presentation every morning just about with the lady one, Rita Pearson, who I tried to stalk, but she's unfortunately passed away. So I decided I'd become her friend, which I've done before. But she has 7 minutes of 48. And the whole principle is that every kid deserves a champion. And I believe every adult deserves a champion. So when I'm looking at education, I'm looking for where is the possibility of connecting. Now, you don't have to be face-to-face all the time, but even to do across distance, but to connect and mentor and to have someone who believes in you, because every single student will hit bumps. The enrolling is the easy bit. Someone that believes and challenges you and extends you and gets you through to the point that you're ready to do the same for someone else, that's what you really want.
You're listening to 89.7 FM Eastside Radio. This is Natasha and The Dialogue Show. I am interviewing Tricia Velthuizen, a remarkable woman, the CEO of Churchill Education. So when you do your graduations each year, how many people do you have? I mean, how many people are graduating tonight?
I think there's about 20 tonight. We do them every 6 weeks, so we don't hold them.
So
we don't hold them once a year. We continue to do them in smalls. I have done them for one.
Okay.
So if a family wants to come to a place and say, will you graduate my person in front of my family and friends, I will do that. It's not normal, but the reason that we do small groups is that I can't tell a story. Many of us have been to mass graduations, and if you're lucky, you have a moment where you see your friend or loved one cross the stage and everyone wants to cheer and have their moment in the spotlight. So we do small groups frequently. And that way I can stand and spend a few minutes telling their story from stage before they're presented with their qualification. And to see them, they rise up more at the telling of the story, I think, than before the piece of paper comes.
Let's talk about what your X factor is. There's something out there that makes you get up every day and go. I mean, you've had a tough time. I mean, you actually speak in a beautiful way, and it seems so loving. And yet, you've had a not that easy sort of financial upbringing. You had difficulty going to university. You dealt with extremely challenging issues when you were a lawyer. Your husband has had PTSD. All of those things you seem to have kind of hit head on and dealt with. So there's something inside you. You have an extraordinary X factor, and I want to know where that is, because I want to know if we can clone it, and I could maybe make some money out of you. What is your thing?
People that know me well would tell you that I don't like talking about me. I'm pretty good at diverting it onto something else. I did a conversation earlier this week with a friend, and I think that point came up pretty early. I just believe that I really do believe in the strength of everyone's story, and I believe that there is there's this one thing that I took away from being raised in the church for that period of 6 or so years, and it's a quote that says, "For I know the thoughts I have towards you, thoughts to give you a future and a hope." And so whenever I hit the harder times, I try to regroup and look for the future and the hope, and keep striving for that, and the belief that there is an incredible future for each of us, and that's the thing that I try to pass on. But I genuinely believe in people, even in the hardest of days and in the most disappointing of moments. I'm far from perfect with it, and I try to be really authentic about that. I don't think I have an X factor. I just think that all of us have this heart and a possibility for our future.
We're coming towards the end of the interview, which is always just so miserable, because I just love chatting to great people, and you're one of those. My last question to you is, how do you relax? Like, how do you, what's for you? I mean, I love to have my feet rubbed. I mean, what do you do?
I try to. I've worked out that my 14-year-old boy, a good punishment for poor choices is rubbing his mother's feet. So I've been shamelessly exploiting that. Look, I love to read. I'm a bit caught at the moment with spoken word poetry. That just sends my heart alight, and finding moments. Tim Minchin, White Wine in the Sun, I play far too often, and I play for the beauty of the writing. I've listened to Tim Minchin talk about you make your offering, and you make the best offering that's in you. And so I find, whether it's writing something small, I find an opportunity to go, what's my best offering and how can I share that? And that makes the world seem to hum a little bit sweeter.
We've come to the end of the interview with Tricia Velthuizen, CEO of Churchill Education. Thank you so much for sharing.
Natasha.
And I have to say, for someone who doesn't like talking about themselves, you've done yourself very, very proud.
Thank you.
Thank you. The Dialogue will be back next week with another incredible interview.